Good morning and welcome to Eschaton 2025 in Sydney, Australia. I'm just delighted to be able to stand here as your kind of conference host to welcome you all. We've got people come from all over the world, Brother Preston. This lady here, Dawn Stead, said to me about 6 months ago, I think Dawn Preston is prepared to come out to Australia again. We thought, oh my. And here we are. It's all good. Now, the way this is going to work today, in the next couple of days is that we're going to run this by the clock so that the streams are always working, always online. And we're going to start at this time window, and you can see how the sessions will run momentarily. Heidi's going to be our interim timekeeper to let the speakers know. And we have to sort of stop. We don't have to, but we're kind of thinking that we just stop the streams and reset them to be sure that the videos work and everything going along the way. Now, if you have questions, if you're watching on the live stream or you have questions, what we want to do is to get you to send questions to eschaton2025@gmail.com. All right. And so if you say, questions like, why is Al wearing that stupid tie? That's what you do, right? And then what we'll do is if we get time, we're not sure how we're going to do that here because we're kind of full up with schedules. Don has said that he will be happy to host one of his Two Guys in a Bible or whatever streams, include our speakers, and we'll all get together and go over the questions and talk about them once we are kind of back to normal. And so that could work as well. And because I think questions will continue to come in while ever people watch the stream. By the way, and we should learn how to say this, if you are watching from overseas, whatever, you're welcome here. We wish you could all be together with us. So first of all, it's my pleasure to start with the keynote today. And I want to talk about modest versus immodest claims. And some of the things that have gotten us all into trouble, some of those things that we have done or said. Oh, by the way, I've got a second microphone which allows me to walk around here. What do I mean? Well, you can make immodest claims and still be right, or you can make right claims in an immodest manner and be right, be wrong, and you just put your audience off straight away. So just a couple of things to think about as we're opening up. What do people remember? What do people remember, right? So we're really big, those of us who are into eschatological reform, we're really big at pointing out the failures, particularly of dispensationalists, but others who say, this thing is in the newspaper, it must be a fulfillment of prophecy. You've seen all that happen. And then when it doesn't happen, when whatever doesn't take place in the Middle East or whatever, we're also pretty big at saying, I told you so. Didn't I tell you that wouldn't happen? Right? Right? We were probably correct to make those claims. That's not so much the issue. The point, however, is that we need to understand that our audience is important. And our audience perception of what we say is important. When you say, I told you so, or remember what I told you, or you should have listened to me. Now, this isn't marriage counseling, by the way, but it probably works in marriage counseling as well. What do people remember? They don't remember that, but they remember your immodest claims. You ever notice that? Because one time this guy said, I don't know, Nero was the Antichrist, or whatever, right? That's a conversation that we had last night. So when I first began this journey, I saw that 666-616 connection, and I stomped my foot and blew smoke out of my nostrils to quote David and said, Nero was the Antichrist. Right? Well, I have to tell you, that was an immodest claim. Not only was it incorrect, I could have made it in a more modest manner. Because other people that I have now been, spoken to, and they said, oh, you're not saying Nero's the Antichrist anymore, are you? Yeah, okay, I get it. I'm sorry, okay? So there are ways to make a claim and to keep your audience online with you. And I think a lot of times we've gotten into trouble, certainly once we start looking at maybe the time statements in scriptures, and we've said, oh, I get this, I get it. We want to say things like, Jesus came back in AD 70. You've said that, haven't you? You've been tempted. Or we're not in the last days, or the tribulation is past. Now, you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, when you first heard when you first heard those things, they were foreign concepts to you too, right? When I first heard that all prophecy was fulfilled in AD 70, I believe it was only the Holy Spirit that kept me patient, kept me from throwing things, screaming, shouting, whatever. It probably is worthwhile. No, I better not say that. In my case, I guess, and maybe in our case, it was the Holy Spirit, but we need to take some responsibility for how we say things like that and what we do. So I don't make claims that are this harsh anymore. Now see, between you and me, I can do it. We can say, upon the Lord's return when the temple fell, can't we? No one's going to throw a rock at us. It's all fine. We all get it. But how would I say that? How would I make a claim like that to people who are genuine? They're sincere. They love God. And the worst thing I could ever do is alienate them for life. Right? That's just the worst thing. Well, let's try some. Let me just, what have I done here? Let's try some kind of examples. I might say something today like, I'm becoming more and more fulfilled. Yeah, right. Let's try this one again. Sounds like a self-help seminar. I'm becoming more and more convinced over time that all prophecy was fulfilled by AD 70. Now you say, well, aren't you fully convinced? Yeah, I'm pretty fully convinced, but I'm going to tell you, my conviction is still growing. I haven't lied to my audience. One of my favorite blocks of text in the book of Psalms is the Songs of Ascent from Psalm 120 to 134. Beginning with, it's this darkness to light passage, 134, come bless the Lord, all you servants of the Lord who stand by night. And when I was reading that, I was studying that 134th Psalm, I saw and learned these Psalms were sung at the Feast of Tabernacles at Shavuot, and that last Psalm is a call for God to bring his glory in the clouds, judgment. I only learned that a couple of months ago. That has increased my conviction that all prophecy is fulfilled by AD 70, right? So I'm not lying at all, right? And so this is a nice way to bring somebody along. When you're sitting there with your friend who has just realized for the umpteenth time that Vladimir Putin is probably not, who is he supposed to be? Gog, Magog? Who is he this week? Right? Yeah, I don't know. Whoever he is, you've just realized for the umpteenth time that this is the case. We need to learn the skills of taking that person's hand and saying, why don't you come with me on a journey? Just come with me. I've become more and more convinced over time, that there's a better way to look at these prophecies. Right? Now, when you use language like that, you immediately are showing some personal vulnerability. And you're really doing something that helps the other person to take your hand and come with you on a journey. Now, we had a very interesting conversation, maybe it was Maury, I don't know, the other night, about our church and how we've been able to make some of these pretty strong preterist comments in the pulpit without being thrown out just like that. And one of the things that happened probably just by accident is that over time, I learned to make really gentle statements and just to bring people along with me. I'm not that good. I think it was just the Lord. But let's just follow along here. So when they heard you make those claims, they'll say things like, you don't believe in the second coming or you're denying Scripture. How many of you have been faced with that? Right. So you've made a claim that was probably immodest. Their response is also pretty immodest, by the way. Okay. But the principle here in rhetoric is that offense is taken, not given. Right. You have to be careful not to try to give offense, but also, not to take it as well. So this is the way this works. This is the way these things work. So, I was going to say immodest claims Al has made. I'm just not going to do that because we've all made the same thing. Hey, how do you like this statement? You don't know everything, so stop behaving like you do. Okay? Right? This is a really, really kind of, I actually have a little whiteboard that I sit, where I'm working just with my stuff. That's right there on the corner of my whiteboard, little block. Al, you don't know everything. Stop behaving like you do. You remember how good it was when you were 18 when you knew everything? Wasn't it great? So, Jeremy, you got 1 year to go and you'll know everything, right? And so, no, you don't. So, I want to show you a little graph. and ask you if you know what this graph is without the text. Anybody here know what this graph is? This is the Dunning-Kruger graph. The Dunning-Kruger graph. You've all had this Dunning-Kruger thing going on here. So the Dunning-Kruger effect works like this. I've just learned something new. Now I know everything about the topic. Okay? So early on in my journey to covenant eschatology, I read 2 of Don's articles and several others by several other people and became an instantaneous, immediate, absolute authority on eschatology. I was it. And I based everything, all of my initial immodest statements, not on prophetic language, not on prophetic patterns, not on understanding good hermeneutics, on only one thing, just one thing alone. This is the biggest, stupidest mistake I ever made. I based everything only on the time statements. Right? Because, Don wrote this great little book, Can God Tell Time? Great book. There were summaries of the articles on, the early websites. I thought, this could not have happened at this time. It's got to have happened back then. I know. So here I was in the first part of this curve here. Everybody I talked to, I answered all their questions about the fact that the timing is completely impossible. Right? Now I would say that today, while that's correct, it's just really not enough information, is it? It's just really not enough information. So let's see, when you look at the Dunning-Kruger curve, and this, by the way, is a very, very interesting effect. Anything in your life, anytime you learn something new, you have a sense of confidence, don't you? Where's a really good example? YouTube recipes, right? So you've always wanted to cook that perfect roast leg of lamb, the one? And you get and listen, this is how this works. And you find a 2-minute short. Shorts are limited to 2 minutes. And you watch the 2-minute short, and because you didn't get a chance to stop it, because you were doing something else, like desperately trying to cook something else that was failing, the 2-minute short replays, and it replays about 8 times, and you think, I now know how to make the perfect roast lamb. I'm at about 4 roast lambs off of one 2-minute short. I continue to play, and slowly I'm getting there. Slowly, it's getting better and better and better over time. But you get that little bit of information. You get naturally excited. You now know you've got it there. Ladies and gentlemen, this has caused us a lot of misery because our audience hears that as well. Okay? Be more modest, be circumspect, take your time, think the things through. So what this chart actually shows, and there's a lot of work done on this. You just go home and look at Dunning-Kruger and you'll say, where am I on this curve? The first thing that happens is you have a high degree of confidence. You remember that first time you found out that the Olivet Discourse was all about the fall of Jerusalem? Remember that first moment? You may have never heard that. You may think, I've got the answer. I've got it. I really, really know. And you're totally confident. Now it is, but there's a lot going on there. And so you have this spike in confidence. But when the spike of confidence begins, your level of competence is how high? Very, very low, right? And then as your level of competence increases, and somebody asks you a question about, like, the Great Divide in the Olivet Discourse, or the Scavenger's Feast or something, and you think, I don't know, right? Your confidence begins to fall, right? And so this begins to happen right here, and your confidence falls off. And as time goes on, your confidence falls off as you become more and more and more competent. Has anybody ever seen this before? This is marvelous. This may be the answer to all your marriage problems as well, right? Every time I do this, you tell me that I'm wrong. Right? When she says, we have to talk, right? He says, what have I done now? Yeah, what have I done? And when he says, we have to talk, she says, what has he done? Right? So, as your competence grows. But in time, as our competence grows, our confidence begins to increase again. Okay? Now, I can actually talk about this here now. I can talk about the Scavenger's Feast or the Great Divide and the Olivet Discourse with a much more common confidence. I can even be modest. Don taught me something many years ago where people ask him about a kind of a question about something, and he says, at this time, this is my opinion. Isn't that wonderful, right? This is my at this time moment, right? Now, you see, this is the time statement here, right? This grows over time. At this time, I'm confident about this or this or this. So this is the Dunning-Kruger curve. It's important. Learn something new, realize you're going to be an authority in your own mind for a short period of time. Now, there's another reason that our audience resists us. There's many, but there's another reason. And when I say us, people who are interested in eschatological reform. And that's because of a thing called the sunk cost fallacy. Okay? The sunk cost fallacy. I've attributed it from a website called Decision Lab. What is the sunk cost fallacy? Well, I'm a coward. And let's say that I had written a whole bunch of little books on the soon coming of the rapture. And that I was traveling the world having conferences. And I was, and it didn't really matter that today Vladimir Putin was the Antichrist, because the last time I spoke, somebody else was the Antichrist. You know how it goes. And my entire ministry, my entire business is all tied up with this kind of concept, this kind of idea. This is it. This is it. I have, listen carefully, sunk a lot of cost into my position. I've sunk a lot of cost into my position. It was costly to get there. It's very costly it's somehow costly to stay there because I'm never right. But it is immensely costly to get out of it. All right? And when somebody says, our entire structure, our entire ministry, our entire denomination, our entire everything is waiting on the imminent soon coming of the Lord, and it's ingrained not only in our doctrinal statements, but in everything that we write, everything that we say, everything that we do, and you challenge them and so on. I've sunk a lot of cost into this. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to be tender with people in this place. Just think for a quick moment of the dark, looming anxiety, anguish that would appear in someone's soul when they finally realize it's possible that every single thing I've written about this is wrong. Just think how hard that is. Just imagine. And maybe you can never affect a leader, but you can certainly often affect a follower who's got this material. Just imagine if every single thing I believed about this is wrong. Wow. You know, how many of us made decisions, I certainly did, in the 70s and the 80s based on the imminent return of the Lord? You know, a lot of us did. We were taught that was the way that was going to happen. Well, thankfully, they weren't too toxic in my case, but there definitely were in other people's, lives. Horrible. So the sunk cost effect. The sunk cost effect is something to really understand. So these two, then I go on to my closing points here today. The first thing to realize is that there is such a thing as the Dunning-Kruger curve effect. First time you learn something, it's just brand new. You are an authority. I saw by the nods and the smiles that you're all there. And then you face, as your competence grows, this all changes, and eventually your competence comes back again, and your confidence comes back again. The second one that I want to highlight here is the sunk cost effect. Now, in making these conversations with people, I want to end by talking about things that you think your friends know. Things that you think your friends know. We have a number of things that we know, and it's funny. We had a long chat last night, Catherine, and it was like, I can say to you, you can say to me, that text is a day of the Lord text, right? You can do that, right? I can say to Duncan, hey, Duncan, that's a day of the Lord text, and say, yeah, I get it. In fact, we're so good at this, ladies and gentlemen, I don't even have to say day of the Lord anymore. I can just say D-O-T-L. Right? So I can ask Dawn, I can say, I've just bumped into this passage here, this statement in the Psalms. Dawn, is that a D-O-T-L reference? We've got an inside language. We think there's things that our friends know they have no idea about. So let's look at just a couple of these. Almost no one who's ever thought about this at all has any idea that the Bible has multiple Day of the Lord events in it. But those of us as preterists, we understand. And I'm going to talk about one in my ending message today that I missed for many, many years. But we understand the day of the Lord against Egypt. We understand the day of the Lord against Babylon, the day of the Lord against Edom, the day of the Lord against Israel several times. We understand that. It's kind of like shorthand. But almost no one outside of our camp, even leaders, preachers, whatever, have any sense that there are multiple day of the Lord events. So you have to be so careful when you get into these topics. You have to say, okay, this is something you don't know about, right? A claim can sound very immodest because you say, that's a day of the Lord event. All right, AD 70. When I was 10 years old, I stayed at my grandfather's place. It was a Dutch grandfather down the road, and he had a library there of books, and just read myself to sleep. And the book that I read when I was between 10 and 11 was Josephus' Jewish Wars. Now, I am pretty convinced that because I read that these people have suffered terribly, right? These people have suffered. I'm pretty convinced that probably set the stage for me to learn some things later on, because I can still remember my horror at reading this as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old boy. Daniel, I'm not recommending that just right now, but that was that. But then many years later, I began to see and understand that the prophecies in the New Testament particularly had to be fulfilled in the lifetime of the audience. How in the world you can make this 2,000 years away or 200 years or 20 years after the audience is dead? It just had to be fulfilled. And this brings you back to this question of AD 70. I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, when you say AD 70 to most people, they'll think you're talking about 1870. Right? They have no sense. Bible class, whatever. And he put his hand up and said, Aren't the events of AD 70, the fall of Jerusalem, aren't they spiritually significant? This is like 40 years ago. And teacher said, no answer, nothing, not significant. Well, to us, they're very significant. So, but your audience doesn't get it. So be careful what you do. How do I do that? Well, I'll often preface the discussion. You're aware that Jerusalem fell in the year 70. The temple was destroyed. I'm really looking forward to Maury's talks on the temple. He's been kind of opening the door to us like, wow, this is going to be really, really amazing stuff. Are you aware that this all happened by then? Oh. Right. Here's the other thing your audience is pretty much not aware of at all. We think they are. Cloud comings, cloud events, right? So you say, oh, this was the Lord coming in the, truly. This was the Lord coming in the clouds to bring judgment. Just imagine how hard it is for somebody who's never considered any of those things, right? So we have to learn to communicate our message tenderly, smartly, sometimes over time. A 2-minute communication of your message is almost certainly never going to be enough, all right? So, and the other one that our audience has almost no sense of at all is cosmological language. What do I mean by cosmological language? Yeah, it's prophetic. It's prophetic, poetic language. And for those of us who know, well, it's not that hard. But for those of us who don't, it's terrible. The whole idea of the earth being shaken and yet surviving. The whole idea of the earth being split open and all life being killed because of some cosmological event, yet people are still hiding under rocks, right? That's really, really difficult. Now you could do what, and a lot of them have just fallen into the liberal trap of saying the Bible doesn't mean what it says what it means, it's just whatever. But the idea of cosmological language is so important, and we have to understand they don't get it. So you often have to end up bringing people along in that journey in a place where they're comfortable. Okay, where's a good place to start? Well, you can start saying that in poetry and in prophecy, types and symbols are used all the time. Say, what do you mean? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Right? Everybody knows the 23rd Psalm. Look at the 23rd Psalm. How many of these things could possibly be literal? How many of these things are what you'd call cosmological? Whatever, whatever. Oh, and you see the lights turn on. Oh. And this is a journey that requires tenderness. It requires the making of modest claims, such that your audience does not immediately think, first of all, that you're losing your mind, and secondly, that you are that you're arrogant, that you know what they don't know. Okay, so this is the importance of modest versus immodest claims. Ladies and gentlemen, we're on the cusp of something that I hardly believe. When my precious friend Dawn here said Dawn Preston's prepared to come out, the last time Dawn came out, we were very small audiences, weren't we, Dawn? Just very, very few, mostly local people. I had to beg, plead, whatever to turn up. For everybody that you're going to see here, there were 2 or 3 who wish they could come but can't. Okay? That is amazing. This message is growing like you wouldn't believe. In fact, the kind of things that I hear people say are they're tired of all the futurist eschatology. They know there's something more. They're just keen to find out what's going on right here, right now. The next time, if we do this again, we can't do this building anymore. We'll have to do a more substantial venue, and we'll talk about how we're going to do that in the future. We're part of something really, really wonderful. There's something that's happened you can sort of see all over the world, and I think in Christian circles, we're beginning to get a sense of what God is doing, and he's doing it here, and we're part of this. So that's good. All right. So let me just do this again so that you know. Dunning-Kruger, look it up. Okay. Next. Sunk cost fallacy. How hard do you think it would be for Jack Van Impe, he's gone now, I think, to have said everything I ever said about eschatology was wrong? Right? Okay. Your friends, you think your friends know. Let's just add to this list in a few minutes. What else do you think your friends know? Let's do this. Audience response. Things you think your friends know. What do you want to add to this list? Say it again, nice and loud. Audience relevance, reader relevance. In fact, I was almost going to add, I forgot all about that. That is so good. My friend there, Mr. Heath, said that this was like your the IDU was reading an article about audience relevance. And again, does your audience know about audience relevance? Especially if you're raised in a Pentecostal world or a charismatic world, you actually believe that the entire book was written directly to you in your generation. Right? Directly. Jeremiah 29, that's directly to me, 29:11, right? And so just absolutely, yes, there you go, that too. Yes, it was written to me in my generation about primarily American politics. Right? Audience relevance. Okay, yes. Anything else you want to add to this list?
Time statements.
Time statements. Thank you, Duncan. Yes. You think that your audience knows about time statements. That was my first sin, didn't I? I put everybody off. They don't. Never thought about it. So, fundamentally, in prophecy, time is basically literal. Language is basically figurative. That's about right, Don?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put the word basically in there because that way the claim is immodest, right? But yeah, your audience doesn't. You want to add another one to this while I close?
Yeah, the covenants. I don't think they understand the difference between the covenants.
Yeah. So when you start talking about this is covenantal transformation, they think you need medication, right? Yes. Yes. Raj.
Transitional period.
Transitional period. Yes. How many of you messed up on, first of all, covenants? How many of you messed up on covenants? All the time. All the time. And to your point, Dawn, even no one understands and has a sense the language of covenants correctly. Yeah, that's right. And we just throw it around. Yeah. Transitional state. Transitional. From AD 40 to AD 70, right? Already but not yet. Yeah. Yeah. That's another one. Your audience has no sense of it all. covenantal statements. There's other things that your audience really you think that they know. The list could go on and on, but we've got a couple of minutes here. How about the captivities? Okay. It's truly, if you read the scriptures, if you read the Old Testament, even the New, but you say, so much is leading up to the captivity, so much happens during the captivity, so much happens after it. When you even use the phrase of captivities, the audience, I don't even know what you're talking about. Okay? So more. Want another one?
Second Exodus.
Second Exodus. Yes. Hey, you got a book on the second Exodus coming, Don?
No, book coming out on the millennium in which I talk about the second Exodus.
Yes. Yeah. Double fulfillment. Yes. Okay. Well, back to the Exoduses. The first Exodus as the type of the second Exodus. Phenomenal. In fact, Don and I were speaking over breakfast the other day, and I thought there's a lot to this. That's time for a lot of long-form study. Double fulfillment, brother. Here we go. Double, twice the trouble. Right? But your audience basically will put away a scripture that you present to them because they say, that's going to be fulfilled again in the future. Okay? Yep, that. But when you test them and you say, well, hang on just a moment here, the death and the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, that's a prophecy. Is that going to be fulfilled more than, okay, right? But you're exactly right. The double fulfillment thing is a big thing. So there you go. We're going to be able to end and hand this over to Dawn just a little bit earlier. So there's our opening speech. Welcome. I hope you have a great time here. We're talking about, we had a concept that I introduced to my audience, my congregation on Sunday morning. They all liked it. I made an immodest claim and they wanted to make it more modest. This is what I said. I said, I've been to many conferences over the years, and I'm staring across the room at that person over there I want to talk to. Because I know that person over there is worth thousands and thousands of dollars to me if I can get to that person, if it's a business conference. But I can't leave this conversation. You ever been there? Right. Now, there are people in this room who are going to be friends for life. So I said that we should adopt a 10-minute rule. That is, if your conversation with somebody exceeds 10 minutes, pick yourself up and go away. Or say, it's time to mingle. They said to me, that's too long. And they wanted a 5-minute rule. Okay? So what I'm encouraging you to do is to get to know as many people as possible. What we've done with the lanyards is your name. Maybe you want to put your city on there or whatever, but that's all good. All right? So God bless you. We'll pause the stream, pick the stream up again momentarily when we introduce the speakers.